Pam, behind you!
We are talking Mask of Thorn. This one is written and directed by M.J. Dixon. This is actually a sequel to the 2014 movie Legacy of Thorn, although it can be pretty much watched as a separate piece. Now, this is a super low budget slasher flick, but actually has more in connection with, I would say, with the Terminator than a kind of slasher movie per se. But I guess if you kind of want to give it a log line, you're going to ultimately say it's kind of, what if Jason Voorhees was the Terminator? That's kind of what I would kind of briefly kind of put the plot here. What we have, the movie initially starts off in the 70s, and we see this kind of woman and her young baby being pursued by a relentless masked killer. And then, you know, it kind of like ends that scene, I won't say how. And then we cut to some years later, and now it is this 16-year-old girl. She's having a birthday, she's having a sweet 16 party. Her friends have kind of like taken her out to bust into the school to kind of like, you know, drink illegally and etc. And then once again, this killer, Thorn, this masked killer, shows up, but she seems to be protected by this kind of Kyle Reese-style character, who may have a connection to her. Anyway, that's your kind of, that's your basic plot here. So, this movie really is, it's pretty much the plot of Terminator. What works, first of all, with this movie? Okay, the movie is just a blatant rip-off of Terminator, but nonetheless, I do feel it was still a relatively kind of interesting idea for a story. One thing I did like, maybe this one doesn't, the Terminator didn't have, is so much it was the there seems to be a bit of a conspiracy. Can it add? I mean, there are elements of supernatural stuff here as well. And there's the element of this kind of like conspiracy in regards to people that are involved in you know, the kind of nefarious kind of goings on, which obviously is nothing really to do with Terminator. So there is, although the plot itself is very kind of, let's just call it a rip-off of Terminator, there are elements here that kind of give it some type of kind of originality. For me, one relatively small aspect that I quite like here is the character of Bethany has this friend called Olivia, who is her kind of best friend, and they are very different type of people. That Olivia is like kind of like the bad girl, whilst Bethany's like the good girl sort of thing. And normally, I always sort of think in like, a lot of like horror films and stuff, you know, these people wouldn't really be friends in real life. There's not realistically what happens. But I've got to say, the way these two girls interacted, I thought, do you know what? I can see them being friends. I can see that they both bring out aspects in each other that the other one kind of would want. You know, the bad girl kind of wants to have, you know, wants to kind of be better, and the good girl kind of wants that element of danger. So I actually thought it surprisingly worked pretty well for the movie. Now, it being a very low budget kind of film, there is obviously limitations, yeah, the main one here is the kind of the effects, I suppose. But I'm gonna say that there are a couple of attempts here to have kind of very low budget kind of gore effects here. But unfortunately, this movie, I'm struggling to find a lot to kind of recommend it, because, to be quite honest with you, it's so low budget and kind of like done on a kind of like an amateur level. And the guy behind this has done for movies before. Obviously, he's done the other kind of Thorn movie, Slasher House, and a couple of other ones. So he's a relatively prolific director. But I'm going to say, I don't feel that there's not that I've seen those films, but this being a later one, it seems very amateurish for someone who has, you know, a reasonable kind of like body of work. The acting here is so cheesy. I mean, it's, God bless them, these are probably not actual actors as a profession, and they're probably just friends of the director, I would imagine, and they're probably doing their best, but obviously what we are seeing on screen, this is what we have to judge, and you know there are some quite hilarious performances, I must be honest with you. Some fare a little better than others, but to be honest with the most part here, the acting is somewhat kind of laughable, as is the kind of the cheesy kind of dialogue that is very kind of ham-fisted and kind of on the nose. The actual killer himself, I mean, they should have called him Sausage Fingers. For some reason, he's got these huge fingers. But he just wears this like super cheesy mask, and I got a feeling that the filmmaker thinks it looks badass, but it doesn't. It looks like someone could go and play Laser Quest in it. It just looks silly with the kind of the light up eyes and stuff. I mean, it looks like something you'd buy in a kind of a Poundland for, you know, obviously £1, and kind of wear on a Halloween if you're on a mega budget. It looks really cheap. The actual plot, as I've said, despite the fact that the story is there is some interesting elements here, we can't get away from the fact that this movie is just kind of ripping off Terminator so badly. You know, it's just like, it's such a kind of a blatant rip-off. You can't give it too many points for having some kind of reasonable story, because it's just a copy of someone else's. Sometimes the pacing of this movie is very kind of mixed. I mean, it's not a particularly long film necessarily, but there are scenes that do feel particularly kind of drawn out as well. And just the whole movie is just this very low budget film. Like a minute into this movie, you'll see like it's meant to take place in the 70s. You'll see this kind of like this guy with a kind of curly wig on, and you can just see his real hair are just like poking out underneath and stuff like that. There's literally no attention to detail. Now, this is, I would imagine, meant to be a kind of a B movie, a schlocky film, but I don't feel that you can just use that as an excuse to have kind of poor standards. And which is what we do in this channel. We review low budget indie movies, and I feel that there are just things that have just been, it's fine, don't worry about it. It's a B movie, no one's going to care. Make the effort, you know, make the effort to make a better movie. I just feel there's a lot of sloppily done stuff here. And for a director who has a body of work, I feel at this stage, I would have imagined to have been a bit more proficient. But it just looks like it's been filmed over a weekend with his friends, and, you know, minimal kind of like effort in regards to the details, to be honest with you. And if you don't have a lot of money, don't overextend yourself. But you can get there's a great number of low budget movies that really have been done on a shooting budget that get around this by having an interesting idea, fleshed out characters, you know, and an interesting kind of plot hook here. Now, like I said, I do feel maybe if you like cheesy slasher films, and I know that slasher films have this big kind of like fan base, and, you know, a lot of people kind of like them and enjoy the kind of the low budget ones, and that's good. This may well be one for you to pick up, because, like I said, there are a couple of interesting elements here, and I do feel this movie does have an attempt, albeit one that's been copied, to have a slightly kind of more interesting story than maybe a lot of kind of more straightforward kind of slasher movies. But I can't get over the fact that it's just a copy of another film. So, could I recommend this film? Only for a small amount of audiences. If you know who you are. If you're a fan of the kind of like low budget slasher films, check it out. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. It does have some cheesy charm, I will say that. Some cheesy charm, but it's just very kind of sloppily put together. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.